Assalamu alaikum. My name is Nurul Nazifa, and I'll be the first presenter for my group, Lucida. So today, my group and I will present about SPARTECA, which stands for South Pacific Regional Trade and Economic Cooperation Agreement. My group members are Shaipul, Amin, Nadia, Iman, and Hajara. So what is SPARTECA? SPARTECA is one of the many regional trade agreements. It's a trade agreement under which Australia and New Zealand allow duty-free access to all items produced in the Pacific Island countries, which means that these Pacific Island countries are able to export their products and goods to New Zealand and Australia on duty-free basis. Now, the countries that are members with SPARTECA are Australia, the Cook Islands, Fiji, New Zealand, Papua New Guinea, the Solomon Islands, Kiribati, the Marshall Islands, Micronesia, Nauru, Samoa, Tonga, Tuvalu, Niue, and Vanuatu. So the reason why SPARTECA exists is because it needed to help ease import restrictions on the island products that are entering New Zealand and Australia in order to address the large imbalance or the unequal trade relationships between Australia, New Zealand, and the other PICs. And this regional trade agreement was signed in Kiribati on the 14th of July in 1980. But it wasn't until the 1st of January of 1981 when it really entered into force. The objectives of SPARTECA is to assist Pacific Island countries to develop faster by expanding trade with Australia and New Zealand. It is also to encourage investment and to facilitate economic cooperation. So a key information about SPARTECA that we should highlight is that it is a non-reciprocal trade agreement. And under the rules of the World Trade Organization, WTO, this is not allowed. So another two trade agreements were established in 2001. The Pacific Island Countries Trade Agreement, PICTA, and the Pacific Agreement on Closer Economic Relations, PACER. So this was made to replace SPARTECA with a reciprocal trade agreement. Now, the next presenter will present on the successes of SPARTECA. Thank you.
Assalamu alaikum, I'm Azra and I will be presenting on the success of SPARTECA Regional Trade Agreement. The textile, clothing and footwear TCF industry has been a major beneficiary of SPARTECA through the preferential access to Australia and New Zealand's market. It has grown over the last 10 years and is now one of the major industries in Fiji. The evidence that can be seen are: in 1997, the TCF industry accounted for 26% of Fiji's total domestic exports. It contributed to 3.5% of the country's GDP and provided employment for about 18,000 people that counted to 16% of those total employment. The rapid expansion of Fiji TCF industry has been attributed to the removal of TCF quotas by the Australian government, which allows quota-free and duty-free access under SPARTECA.
Assalamualaikum, my name is Nur Nadia. So research articles shown that the successes or benefits of SPARTECA is quite little, and the most notable success of this RTA has been the development of the Fiji garment industry due to the New Zealand textile, clothing and footwear deregulation in 1987. So the details has already explained by Sis Hajara before, and to explain more, the reason of Fiji's high garment export is that the country also undertook a series of economic policies which included a 50% effective devaluation of its currency and the establishment of tax-free factories. Other than that, due to the preferential access to both Australian and New Zealand markets, it also contributes to the increased exportation of automobile parts from Samoa, contributing the country's economic development. So this is because the Japanese automobile manufacturing firm Yazaki relocated a component factory from Australia to Samoa, and the relocation has also provided wage jobs opportunities to the Samoan.
Moving swiftly on, the failure of SPARTECA. I am going to address two failures of SPARTECA, and my friend will address the rest failures of SPARTECA. The SPARTECA was designed to address the unequal trade relationship between Australia and New Zealand and Pacific Island countries. However, Spartica was criticized for failing to address the more restrictive non-tariff and technical barriers to trade, such as quarantine, sanitary, and phytosanitary measures and standards. The second point is a study by the Pacific Island Forum 2007 examining rules of origin conclude that Spartica did not promote significant export growth from PIC, both in terms of volume and compensation.
Assalamualaikum, my name is Syed Rahman. So I will continue about the failures of the RTA. So the following Spartaka failures occur where they offer different ideas such as optimization of air routes and collaboration to acquire equipment, but it appears to fail. The reason for this is because that the island government believed Fiji dominated the air Pacific. They emphasized that it was located in Suva, that is originated in Fiji, that Fiji was the majority shareholder, and that Fijians benefited the most from the airline's jobs opportunities. Furthermore, it was argued that Fiji subsidized the internal airfares by raising rates on specific regional routes above what they should be. So next is about the Pacific Islands nations were united in their desire to recoup part of the massive amount of the tuna stolen out of the region by US Persian vessels. For the last 10 years, the United Nations has been viewed as the primary danger to the Pacific Islands resources security due to its refusal to recognize the coastal states' jurisdiction over highly migratory species. So that's all from me. I will pass to next presenter. Thank you.
So, should Sportica be maintained or disbanded? In our opinion, it should be disbanded because, first, it has proven unsatisfactory in terms of diversing Pacific exports. And second, trade is hampered by restrictive origin rules. Trade agreement usually includes rules of origin requirements which specify a minimum local content or require transformative changes to the makeup of a product before it's deemed eligible for the preferential treatment as a part of agreement in question. The reason for such rules is to avoid the phenomenon known as trade deflection, whereby products are simply transshipped from non-eligible countries through eligible suppliers with little or no local value added. When Spartica was negotiated in 1981, it includes provision requiring the island to add 50% of the value of a product. These rules were designed to discourage businesses from simply passing their goods through Pacific in order to avoid paying import taxes in Australia and New Zealand. Close observers argue that this lack of success is most likely due to the Spartica rules of origin, which fail to account for island economies' greater reliance on imported inputs and the fragment of production across globally integrated supply chain.